Hi, Founder fans. Jason here, and today's founder is Alexander Hamilton. Specifically, we're going to be focusing on what's called the Camillus Defence. It was a defense of the Jay Treaty written by Alexander Hamilton. So let's talk about it. First, before we talk about it, you'll notice the word next to me is defense, and it's spelled wrong. It's spelled with a C, and today we commonly use an S. At the time, people kind of spelled things how they sounded, and this is how Alexander Hamilton spelled it, so that's why it says that. Now that the grammar is out of the way, Alexander Hamilton was just out of the Washington administration. He had resigned his post of Secretary of the Treasury and returned to New York City, where he was beginning to become fabulously wealthy on this new country he had built. At the same time, his buddy John Jay, who helped him write some of the Federalist Papers, well, John Jay was sitting Chief Justice of the United States Supreme Court and was just traveled to England, where he was voted governor of New York and created the Jay Treaty, which is pretty famous in circles that study the American Revolution. In short, it was an agreement with Great Britain that staved off any kind of war and tried to get things the way they were supposed to have been after the Treaty of Paris ended the Revolutionary War. That being said, the Jay Treaty was mildly unpopular, to put it the least. Jay famously said upon his return that he could walk from Boston to Philadelphia all night long from the light of his own burning effigies. That being said, the United States Senate approved the Jay Treaty by a very close vote. It was then sent to George Washington, who wanted to ratify it, but he wrote to Alexander Hamilton, who again had left him in Philadelphia, to decide, Alexander, what should I do here? Should I sign this treaty that I agree with, but a lot of people hate? And Alexander Hamilton wrote back, yeah, you should sign the treaty. It's your work. People love you. You're George Washington. Now, this was one of the most controversial things Washington ever did in his life, was sign the Jay Treaty. That being said, Hamilton wanted to help quell the resistance of the newly forming Democratic Republican Party. So even though he was no longer working for the government, he did take up his pen to fight for it. And Hamilton has become famous for his writing, especially recently with the Broadway musical, but the Camillus Defence is totally omitted. Now, it's not just him. He works with his buddy Rufus King, another really, really important American founder. And the first article is called The Defense. And that's why it's usually referred to as the Camillus Defense, because he writes an article called The Defense, and he signs it under the pen name Camillus. Now, Camillus is, first of all, it's special to me because I used to live in a village named Camillus, but it's the name of a Roman general who served as dictator of Rome for a while. And I believe the correlation is Camillus was able to unite diverse factions within ancient Rome to fight against an outside force. And since this is regarding a treaty, an international treaty, that seems to be the angle he was taking with the pen name Camillus. Between he and Rufus King, they write 42 articles. Hamilton writes basically 2 a week for about 6 months to get everyone on the side. Now, it doesn't really work. People have already dug in at this point and know what their opinion is on the subject. But it's interesting to note that in 1795, this is 6 years after Hamilton wrote the Federalist Papers. More than that, 7 years after Hamilton wrote the Federalist Papers. And as such, the Federalist Papers are mostly about Hamilton's interior thought. In fact, the few discussions about foreign policy are usually the ones John Jay had written. But what's interesting is in these papers, though they're much overlooked today, they are extremely important to learn about Alexander Hamilton because it does speak a lot about his foreign policy ideas, which don't get a lot of attention. He's usually known as the money guy with the Treasury Department and the interior guy with the whole writing the Constitution and Federalist Papers thing. But he did have thoughts on foreign policy, though Washington usually went to Thomas Jefferson for advice on that. That's another story. So in short, the Jay Treaty led to the Camillus Defense, which gives us one of the best tools to understanding Hamilton's outlook on the entire world politics instead of just the interior politics of the United States. It is a lot to read. I suggest you at least read the first one. I'm also going to leave the link in the description to a book about John Jay by Walter Stahl. That it's one of the most amazing biographies I know of the American Revolution. And since we're talking about John Jay, I thought it would be a good time to let you guys know. So definitely check out that link if you're interested in learning more about John Jay. As always, if you're new here, definitely hit subscribe for American Revolution all week long. And if you're always here, well, hit like again, because you hit like every time, and it helps new people find me. I certainly appreciate that. My name's Jason, and I'll be back with another founder for you tomorrow.